Tonight, fears of a widening Middle East conflict materialise in the skies above Qatar. Explosions thump over the Gulf state, where Iran has targeted the largest US military base in the Middle East. Iran says it took aim at the Al Udeid airbase with what it's calling a devastating and powerful missile attack. Qatar says there are no casualties in these strikes, but that it reserves the right to respond. It follows Iran's warning that it has a free hand to attack US targets after American bombs pounded nuclear sites yesterday. Meanwhile, Israel says it's hit Tehran harder than ever, including a notorious prison and elsewhere the Fordow nuclear site that was bombed by the US. And Iran's latest barrage into Israel sends people scrambling for bomb shelters as the first British evacuation flight takes off. While reaching out to a friend, Iran is told by Russia that their partnership is unbreakable. Good evening and welcome to our special program. I'm Yalda Hakim and welcome to Jerusalem, in a region where tonight the threat of a wider Middle East war is escalating. Iran has launched missile attacks at a Gulf ally, Qatar, targeting a massive US military base there. People in Qatar's capital, Doha, watched and filmed in shock as missiles flew above and interceptors fired. Qatar's government says there are no casualties, but added that it's within its right to respond if needed. President Donald Trump has said that they were expecting the attack. Still, Iran has described it as a mighty and successful response to America's aggression after US forces bombed 3 Iranian nuclear sites on Sunday. Well, Al Udeid is one of about 19 US bases across the Middle East, which together host around 40,000 personnel. The airbase outside of Qatar's capital, Doha, is America's largest in the region and hosts the forward headquarters of US Central Command. In western Iraq, there was an alert at the Al-Assad base where interceptors were fired. However, US officials now say it appears this was a false alarm. We'll live shortly to our correspondents in the region and Washington, but we begin with this report from our international affairs editor, Dominic Waghorn.
After 2 days keeping the world guessing, Iran launched its retaliation. Operation Glad Tidings of Victory, sending ballistic missiles on their way. High over Qatar, they were intercepted, one after another. Iran's target, America's huge air base there. A direct response aimed squarely at US assets. There was panic on the ground as shoppers ran for cover. But the Qataris and Americans saw this coming. Iranians are reported to have warned them in advance. Retaliating but avoiding casualties, perhaps, and further escalation.
Suddenly, I see people rushing out the gym and I run out and then we see just missiles flying both ways. It was coming one way first and then they looked very close, but they weren't. And then suddenly there were, I think, the interceptors coming in from the other side. So everyone started rushing home. A little bit of panic on the streets, people quickly flashing, breaking signals, trying to get to their loved ones.
President Trump visited the Al Udeid air base in Qatar only last month. He will now decide how he responds, a potentially fateful decision. Because the situation in the region could not be more combustible. This was Tehran today. Massive clouds of dust and smoke as Israeli jets launched strike after strike across Iran's capital city. 100 bombs in 2 hours, and with them a clear sense of mission creep. Not just military targets, but the buildings and organisations that underpin the Ayatollah's control of their country, including Evin Prison, where political prisoners and foreign nationals have been held. Iran sent its foreign minister to Moscow to seek support, hoping for more than warm words from Russia's president.
The absolutely unprovoked aggression against Iran has no basis and no justification.
The Iranians can protest at the legality of Israel and America's actions all they want.
These aggressive actions by Israel and the US are completely illegitimate and violate international rules and international norms.
But sight by sight, Iran's capabilities are being destroyed. How comprehensively, though, is not clear. Most of all at Fordo, where they were buried most deeply. Iran is still hitting Israel without warning. As those two sworn enemies continue trading missiles, can Iran find a way through this while avoiding escalation with America? Dominic Waghorn, Sky News.
Well, in the last few minutes, President Donald Trump has responded to Iran's attack on that airbase in Qatar. He has said, and let's just get it up on our screen, Iran has officially responded to our obliteration of their nuclear facilities with a very weak response, which we expected, and have very effectively countered. There have been 14 missiles fired, 13 were knocked down, and one was set free because it was headed in a non-threatening direction. I am pleased to report that no Americans were harmed and hardly any damage was done. Most importantly, they've gotten it out of their system and there will hopefully be no further hate. He also goes on to say in a separate Truth Social post, I'd like to thank the highly respected Emir of Qatar for all that he has done in seeking peace for the region. Regarding the attack today at the American base in Qatar, I'm pleased to report, and he goes on to say, in addition to no Americans being killed or wounded, very importantly, there have also been no Qataris killed or wounded. Thank you for attention to this matter. And then he writes in capital letters, quintessential Donald Trump, congratulations, world. It's time for peace. So a few crucial things coming out of those statements that he's made. He's thanked the highly respected Emir of Qatar, to quote Donald Trump, which indicates and confirms that this was a staged, coordinated attack. And as he has said here, that it has allowed Iran to get it out of their system. Hopefully, there'll be no further hate. And clearly, the Qataris have assisted in bringing the two sides, to the negotiating table through these strikes to settle the bill. Well, shortly, we'll speak to our chief correspondent, Stuart Ramsey, who's waiting for us in northwestern Iraq. But first, let's go to our James Matthews, who's at the White House. And James, I've just read those two posts from Donald Trump there, where he confirms a number of things in that very long statement that he's made in Truth Social.
Hi, Yalda. Yeah, I mean, given the normal caveats that come when there is conflict anywhere, I think what Donald Trump has posted is peace. That's how peace is delivered these days. And in this cycle of violence, in a tit-for-tat situation, the question has been all day, within the past few hours, what would America do? How would it react to this Iranian attack? And I think we have from Donald Trump there your answer. Essentially, he speaks about, hopefully, an end to the hate. Hopefully, Iran has got this out of its system. Nothing in there says that he is on the verge of furthering this conflict. Everything reads to me like a president who feels that the job is done, right down to the roll call of thanks at the end, talking about the input of the Emir of Qatar. For Donald Trump, the show's over. He's rolling the credits. And you can see why that would make sense for an American president who always styled this as an intervention not to start forever war, but to prevent one ever breaking out. Donald Trump, if he is to be believed, has, of course, severely weakened Iran, neutered its nuclear ambitions effectively. Israel is in control of the airspace over Iran and can monitor its military ambitions for however long that lasts, certainly in the immediate future and beyond. So Donald Trump has tweaked the politics and the military situation in the Middle East to suit American interests. He has been consistently warned internationally by Britain and by others, but also domestically by people in a Republican movement shuffling its feet, waiting to see where this has gone. He's been warned that he was on the cusp of uncertainty, of dragging America into the quagmire of an extended foreign conflict. Right now, he can look at the situation and claim victory, claim a vindication. He's had his sugar rush of military success, the prime-time president who can portray himself right now as the peacemaker. That's certainly how he is styling it on Truth Social in those last tweets, Yalda. So I think for Donald Trump, the show is over right now. I suppose he would intend things to steer towards dialogue. There was a meeting today with his National Security Council. All the senior players were around the table, Steve Witkoff included. He, of course, is Donald Trump's envoy who was involved in talks with the Iranians. I suppose we'll have to watch his movements very closely in the coming days and weeks. But for those who didn't want this conflict to extend, and there are many here and beyond, I think they will like what they have read from Donald Trump in the past 15 minutes.
Yeah, and James, I have to say, rolling the credits, the sugar rush, you really know how to capture Donald Trump's mindset. And we've been seeing that in these statements on Truth Social. Thank you so much for all of your analysis there. Let's just bring in our chief correspondent, Stuart Ramsey, who joins us live from Erbil now. And there was some confusion, wasn't there, earlier, Stuart? When I came to you, we thought that the Al-Assad airbase, the US airbase there, had been hit as well. But then there was confirmation that that wasn't the case. We're now starting to see there's the airspace in Bahrain, in Kuwait, the UAE starting to open up. The US Embassy says it'll be operational again from tomorrow in Qatar after being closed and asking people to seek shelter. Perhaps this is the moment then where both sides draw a line in the sand. But no doubt people are still feeling quite anxious and nervous in places like Iraq, where you are.
Yeah, absolutely, no doubt about it. And of course, the militaries here, that's the US and the Iraqis, are still on high alert. Be under no doubt about that. Certainly, Iraq would be extremely pleased if diplomacy was going to come back on the agenda. It's stuck right in the middle of this, literally because it's beneath the Israeli warplanes that fly and attack Iran, which absolutely annoys them, but there's nothing they can do about it. And then in terms of its relationship with the United States, it needs to stay close to the United States, and it's very close to Iran. So it would like an end to all of this and diplomacy to come back into and negotiations to start. But what we have seen tonight is just how scary it can be. You can imagine being in Qatar. Yalda, you've been under bombs in Israel for the last couple of weeks or so. I have been. It's very frightening. You don't ever really get used to it. Imagine what you're like in Qatar. That would have been absolutely terrifying. And that is a sentiment, a feeling that all of the Gulf states would have been feeling. Iraq, unfortunately, knows war very well, but those countries do not. So this is why the whole of the region has been so tense about what will happen. There is always this underlying point, though, that Iran may not just call it a day, or it may be something that evolves into attacks in a different way over a longer period of time. But certainly the noises that we're getting from Tehran, but most definitely from the United States, is that this is a line in the sand for now. But two big issues still continue. One, Iran and Israel are still at war, and for many people who live in this part of the world who don't like Iran, Gaza remains a massive issue as well, and that hasn't stopped. In fact, in many ways, it may even really be getting worse while all attention is being away from it. And those two issues continue. So this region may be breathing a sigh of relief tonight, maybe, that things have got better, but it doesn't mean that the region remains any less tense, because there is a war still ongoing.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much, Stuart, for all of those updates. And I just want to bring our audience up to date because Stuart was there pointing out how terrifying this situation would have been for the residents of Qatar. Qatar's foreign ministry, Qatar's interior ministry, an official there says that some debris fell in residential areas. It was handled and no casualties were recorded. But having stood here when ballistic missiles are flying overhead, and people of Iran are feeling it, people here in Israel are feeling it. And this evening, the people there in Qatar, in Doha, were hearing it and seeing those interceptors take out those missiles. It is a terrifying moment, and we do understand that some debris fell in residential areas, but there were no casualties and no injuries recorded. The Qatar Foreign Ministry spokesperson has also said that Doha's regional mediating role will not be deterred by any wrongdoing from any party. So Qatar there putting itself in the driver's seat. We also saw that post on Truth Social from Donald Trump thanking the Emir of Qatar for seeking peace for the region, indicating that the Qataris had intervened and helped coordinate this attack to draw a line in the sand. Let's bring in our Cordelia Lynch, who joins me live from Tel Aviv now. And Cordelia, so the bill may be settled perhaps between the United States and Iran from all the indications we're getting from the ex-post that we saw from Ayatollah Khamenei and now from Donald Trump, who described their operation as weak, but said they have gotten it out of their system, thanked the Qataris. The question is, have things been settled between Iran and Israel? Because we continue to see these strikes from both sides.
Well, I think what is very striking, Yalda, is some of the reporting we've seen in Israeli media in the last hour or so, which seems to suggest that Benjamin Netanyahu may be willing to conclude this war even as early as the coming days, that there is confidence that they have hit the military and intelligence sites in Iran and the top brass of the leadership too, that they are satisfied by those strikes and that they want to bring this to a conclusion. Lots of military analysts and insiders as well suggesting that they feel this Israeli leadership believes this attack in Qatar effectively provides some kind of off-ramp because there were no civilian casualties. It's a ladder, if you like, in which to climb down. Now, if a ceasefire was secured, it would, of course, be fragile. These are perilous times. We've seen a very mercurial week play out, and there is still fear and worry in the air about regional escalation and spillover. But I think it is just interesting, the amount of different sourcing we're seeing coming out there from Benjamin Netanyahu insiders, suggesting actually he wants to bring some kind of resolution to this. Now, he's enjoyed a lot of political support for his actions so far, and he wants to try and capitalize on that. It has been his life's work. He has always talked about this existential threat of Iran. He spoke yesterday saying that they were getting very, very close to achieving their objectives of dismantling Iran's nuclear programs and its ballistic missiles. So that perhaps hinted at some of the confidence that he is feeling. Now that combined with some of the optimism around this strike, it may well be that we could see an end to this conflict. But of course, a note of caution, what we have seen play out in Lebanon with Hezbollah, it does not mean, of course, that Israel might not continue to strike in the days, weeks, maybe even months to come too. But a lot of optimism we are hearing here around some sort of end to this being in sight. Fascinating, because the concern has been about a protracted war. Right now, there is a sense that actually this could be a rather brief one.
Yeah. Absolutely. We will be monitoring all the developments. Cordy, thank you so much. Well, as we've been reporting in the last couple of hours, the airspace over Bahrain, Kuwait, the UAE, and of course over Qatar was closed. And we understand the airspace in all of those places has reopened. Let's speak now to journalist and broadcaster Sally Lockwood, who joins us from Dubai. And Sally, just bring us up to date because we are hearing reports now that the airspace has reopened. There may be some delays with flights, but it feels like things have gone back to normal.
I'm not sure if it's entirely normal yet, Yalda, but certainly there are aircraft flying again in and out of Dubai International Airport, of course, one of the busiest airports in the world. And we saw on flight radar, as this was all unfolding this evening, aircraft being cleared from the area around UAE airspace, like it was in Qatar and Bahrain and Kuwait as well. This has been a really unnerving evening. It's been an unnerving couple of weeks for people in this region. Yes, there's going to be ongoing travel disruption. There's been a lot of flight cancellations. There's been rerouting. Even British Airways and Singapore Airlines have cancelled services in and out of Dubai and Doha, two of the safest countries in the world in normal times. And people here in the last couple of weeks have been really worried about how this was all going to play out. Almost everyone you speak to here, and this is not a country where people worry about security, it prides itself in being one of the safest countries in the world. But everyone I speak to here has been worried about how Iran was going to respond. Now, I think few people thought that they were going to attack a country like Qatar, but of course, that is what we've seen this evening. I think there is a slight sense of relief that it was now, as we know, coordinated, but still, it was absolutely terrifying for people in Doha, in Qatar. As Stuart said, they are not used to conflict or war in these countries. And I spoke to some residents there tonight, one source from Al Udeid Air Base who told me that British military personnel, because of course it's not just Americans who are based there, there's Qatari military and British military personnel based there as well. They were evacuated this afternoon. So they did suspect that something was going to happen. And then, of course, tonight we saw those lights lighting up the Doha skyline. And I heard from residents there to say that they felt their houses shaking. There was one family who said that they were hiding in cupboards underneath their stairs and they felt the house shake up to 10 times with such force that they were really surprised no windows broke. I also heard from another resident that the internet was jamming. It's been a really unnerving evening. But there is a sense potentially that this could be it. And if this is it, can people now relax? I think that's the big question. Of course, there are US military bases all over the Middle East. There's one here in the UAE, Al Dhafra in Abu Dhabi, smaller than Al Udeid, but still a significant size. And there's been a lot of concern, of course, in Iraq, as Stuart was saying, but the hope is now that this could be it. I mean, Iran has also threatened to close the Strait of Hormuz, an essential waterway that carries a huge portion of the world's oil through it, around 20%. They've been threatening to close that, which would have a huge economic impact around the world. There is a hope now that Iran has retaliated. This is it. But of course, we just don't know. And also, the big question is, what will Israel do next? Certainly, it still feels very uncertain and very tense here in the region tonight.
Yeah, absolutely. Sally, thank you so much. So that question that Sally just posed, what will Israel do next? Joining me now is the Israeli ambassador to the United Nations, Danny Danon. Ambassador, thank you very much for joining us here on the program. It does appear that as far as the United States and Iran is concerned, they've drawn a line in the sand. They may have settled their bill based on what President Trump has been saying, based on what Ayatollah Khamenei has been saying. But the question is, what is Israel going to do next? Because this could still remain, this tit-for-tat attacks that we've been seeing between Israel and Iran over the course of the last week and a half.
Well, I think, Yalda, it depends on the situation on the ground. We have a lot of targets still in Iran, and we've proved our capabilities only this morning. But it depends also what Iran will decide to do. And you know what's interesting? You saw that they targeted the military base in Qatar. They proved that they can actually send accurate missiles. But when it comes to Israel, you know, the missile lands in hospitals, in neighborhoods, in communities. So it shows that, you know, when they say that they make mistakes, it's a lie. They have the ability to send accurate missiles, unfortunately. So, you know, we will follow the situation.
Ambassador, as far as we know and the sources we've spoken to, this was a staged, coordinated, planned attack between the United States and Iran, whether directly or indirectly. The US president has confirmed that they were fully aware that this was coming. So in many ways, you know, you say that these were very direct attacks on this base, but also this is very much a staged attack.
Well, I don't know that, Yalda, but, you know, it was an attack from Iran on an Arab state, on a military base. But, you know, I'm talking about the technical aspect of the attack, that, you know, they have the ability to target very accurate targets. But when it comes to targeting Israel, like we see almost every day, they choose to target civilian targets and communities. So, you know, Iran should decide where they're heading. They are aware of our capabilities. And we have demonstrated our ability to target almost everywhere in Iran, including remote sites. So it's basically now up to them to decide what they want to do. We have more targets, but, you know, I think we can all agree that the majority of the threat of a nuclear Iran is behind us, thanks to the work of the IDF and the US.
Ambassador, is it because when we look at the battle damage assessment, which the United States is still looking at, and Israeli media has been reporting it, I'm here in Israel speaking to Israeli officials on a daily basis, and they say that the United States officials have told them that there was heavy damage, but there are some analysts saying that it hasn't necessarily completely obliterated, as the US president has been saying, the Iranian program, and that also the Iranians have moved the materials, the centrifuges. We saw those satellite images of trucks moving the material to perhaps other sites, and that Iran may use this as leverage in the future. So these claims by Israel that perhaps it has, first of all, the questions around the intelligence of whether Iran was in fact close to acquiring a bomb or weaponizing it. But it's certainly tonight, when you look at the situation, the fact that Iran is now saying that they may even no longer, coordinate with the IAEA, has it not created more danger in this region because of Israel's actions by attacking Iran a week and a half ago?
Absolutely not. Exactly the contrary. When you look at where Iran is today compared to where they were 2 weeks ago, when we received the intelligence about their intention, you know, to put together the enriched uranium, the triggering mechanism, the ballistic missiles, you know, today it will take them decades to build similar capability if they choose to do so. I hope they will not do that, because we will follow very carefully what's happening in Iran, and not only us. The entire world will watch very carefully what's happening in Iran. And I think thanks to what we did, and thanks to the US, and we have to be grateful for the leadership of President Trump, because those efforts pushed Iran back. And I hope that the people of Iran will be able to focus on their own issues, you know, build their economy, prosper, have better life, rather than spending hundreds of billions of dollars. You know, Yalda, I don't know if you ever looked at the numbers, but, you know, Iran spent trillions of dollars on this nuclear project, and I think today they should recalculate where they're heading.
Ambassador, you were talking there earlier about how Iran deliberately targets civilians. Many Iranians are angry about the high civilian death toll in Iran as a result of Israel's strikes. We understand over 700 Iranian civilians have been killed in these strikes over the course of the last week or so. Israel has also spoken about regime change, but ultimately when the Iranian public public is currently, there is no love lost, by the way. The bulk of the Iranian people are, no love lost between the regime and the Iranian people. And we've seen over the course of over a decade, going back to 2009, when people have been protesting against this regime. But ultimately, with Israel's actions, it certainly doesn't put Israel in a favorable position when so many civilians in Iran have been killed as a result of these strikes.
So first, let me be very clear about it. We have nothing against the Iranian people. On the contrary, we respect them, we pray for them, and we targeted military sites. And if there were any civilian casualties, we regret that. We have the precise ammunition, and we targeted nuclear sites and military sites. Regarding the regime, it's not up to us to decide whether there will be a regime change or not. I hope it will happen for the people of Iran. They are the one who suffered for 46 years, and they are the one who paid the price since the revolution. So I hope that for their future, there will be a better regime that will invest in the people of Iran and not on the proxies that will send money to schools and hospitals and not to the Houthis, to the Hezbollah, to Hamas. It's about time that the Iranian people will receive what they deserve, which is a better leadership.
That's what you say, Ambassador, but throughout the course of the last week or so, Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has talked about regime change. There's been talk about assassinating the supreme leader. The defense minister of Israel has said that the supreme leader can no longer remain. We've heard very similar sentiment from other ministers here in Israel. So you are taking a more balanced approach here. But across the board, we've seen Israeli leaders talk time and time again about regime change in Iran.
So I will make it very clear. I think many Israelis and many people in the US and across the world would like to see a regime change and believe that's the right thing for Iran. The question if that is part of the goals of the operation, no, it's not part of the goals. Our goals were very clear. We wanted to reduce the threat, to make sure that we push back the nuclear program and the threat of the ballistic missiles. Those were the goals, and we achieved most of them. Regarding the regime change, we will be very happy. It's a wishful thought for, I think, every Western leader that you will ask will tell you that they would love to see a different regime. But the people of Iran will decide about it. It's up to them to choose which leadership they will have.
Ambassador Danon, thank you very much for joining us here on the program.
Thank you very much, Yalda.
Let's bring in our security and defence analyst, Professor Michael Clark. And Professor Clark, we've been watching the developments over the course of the last few hours. Speaking there to the Israeli ambassador to the UN, he sort of dismissed the idea that this was staged. He said this was a direct attack on a US base. But from what we know, this is now both sides attempting to de-escalate the situation, the United States and Iran, and for Iran to find some kind of off-ramp now.
It looks like it, yes. The Iranians certainly were never going to let this pass without a fairly quick reaction. And I think there's quite a lot of indication that the Ayatollah Khamenei has actually devolved quite a lot of immediate decision-making to the chiefs of the IRGC, the Iranian Republican Guard Corps. And they were certainly never going to be, as it were, backward in the way that they responded. So this has been a response. It had to be quite quick. But it is a measured response. It's still a violent response because it could have gone wrong. But attacking Al Udeid is the base at Al Udeid, the biggest American base in the region, and it has high symbolic value because of all the things that go on at Al Udeid. But equally, giving notice of the attack in effect and making sure that they attacked a very heavily defended target, I think was a way for the Iranians to indicate that they were going to do something, but they don't necessarily want to escalate it. And indeed, I mean, there's any number of indications that the Americans had taken sensible precautionary measures. They'd cleared the tarmac at Al Udeid some days ago. I mean, all American ships had left the Fifth Fleet at Bahrain. They'd left port, which is a sensible measure. Just get the fleet out of the way, get aircraft out of the way, don't leave them there as obvious targets. So the Americans more than half expected this. And then when they got some notification in effect that it was going to happen, that was fine. We'll see how the United States chooses to react, whether the US says, well, we accept that the Iranians are trying to reach out to get back to some sort of dialogue. Will they say that? Or will President Trump decide that another response is required because, after all, American forces were targeted, but not very effectively?
Yeah, and Professor Clark, the other concern is while the United States and the US president, as we know, those close to him have said he's got a short attention span, he might move on from this situation. But I guess the bigger question is, does Israel and Iran continue these tit-for-tat attacks? And then does that just continue to put the whole region on edge?
Yes, I think it will. I mean, you're absolutely right to say he has a very short attention span and he moves on, and he's got to move on immediately tomorrow to The Hague because the NATO summit, this big historic summit, begins tomorrow for 2 days. It's the biggest summit for NATO since the formation of the alliance. It's an era-defining meeting in the next 48 hours, starting tomorrow morning. And President Trump and the American staff will have to be pretty focused on that. But it's undoubtedly the case that Iran and Israel will continue to hit each other. Neither of them said that they want to desist. And the Iranians have indicated that a way of expressing their anger and disapproval, a way of expressing their unwillingness to cave in to this pressure is to keep on attacking Israel. However poorly they do that, however fewer missiles they have, the Israelis think that they've taken out more than 50% of the Iranian launchers and more than 50% of the number of missiles that the Iranians have. So if the Israelis have been that successful, Iranian attacks on Israel will diminish, but they'll almost certainly continue. And so if the United States, if President Trump and his staff spend the next 2 days at The Hague, if they spend all 2 days there, as they should do, if they do, they'll get back to Washington to find that this is still going on. So this will be, I think, a continuing crisis, a continuing Israeli-Iranian war, certainly for many days yet. And the United States will have to return to the issue as what are you going to do in order to get the Iranians to some sort of not negotiating framework, but some sort of diplomatic framework where it's possible to de-escalate this particular crisis.
Professor Clark, always good to get your thoughts on these developing situations. Thank you so much. Well, joining me now is Simone Ledeen, the former US Deputy Assistant Secretary of Defense for the Middle East. Simone, thank you so much for joining us here on the program. We're just talking there about President Trump's attention span when it comes to these issues. He's on his way to the NATO summit. He will be there tomorrow. And I guess there will be a lot of pressure from the E3, from other European leaders and NATO partners to try and de-escalate the situation, not just between the United States and Iran, which at the moment feels like perhaps it has been settled, but to try and calm the situation between Iran and Israel.
Well, I think that the Europeans need to will be walking a fine line there, given the very clear message from President Trump and his administration that this action, i.e. the series of strikes that the U.S. military took against the Iranian nuclear program were targeted and focused on really destroying the Iranian nuclear program. This has been an issue, a growing issue, Yalda, for decades, and the European partners have declined really to engage at all on this. And sadly, we found ourselves in this situation where President Trump felt that they were so close to actually achieving a nuclear bomb that a U.S. strike was appropriate. So I think that, again, European partners need to tread carefully there because they're not spotless in this situation. So I would just caution that, and I'm sure that the team that will be accompanying President Trump will be delivering a similar message.
Do you think this now compels Iran? Perhaps Israel and the United States have bought themselves some time, maybe 5 years or so, given what's happened to these key nuclear sites. But do you think this now makes Iran more determined to acquire a bomb?
Well, I certainly hope not, and time will tell. It's difficult to get inside the mind of this Iranian regime. But I will say that every time that they have tried to push back against this American administration, tried to continue negotiations while secretly moving forward with their nuclear program, that's really not going to cut it anymore. So I think that the best chance for peace, which is what we all want and hope for, is the Iranian regime to acquiesce and dismantle its nuclear program, open up everything to the IAEA and to the different assessors that are going to need to come and see what's left, and respond accordingly. So really the ball is in their court.
It seems
President Trump has made clear.
It seems, according to Iran's parliament, that they're looking at approving a bill to say that they would suspend all cooperation with the IAEA. So doesn't that not leave perhaps the world and these negotiations in a more dangerous and precarious situation?
Well, there's a saying in the Middle East, watch the hands, not the mouth. And I think that is appropriate in this situation. They can pass all the bills that they want, but what are they going to do? They have had their ballistic missile capability radically reduced. And as your previous guest noted, the Iranian terror proxies in the region are decapitated, reduced, etc. So they're not at all in a negotiating position they were in just a few weeks or months ago, and that is significant. So they can pass all the bills they want. It doesn't mean they're gonna actually do anything. A lot of it's just propaganda, Yalda.
Simone, we're really grateful for your time. Thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you.
Well, one of the biggest questions tonight, how Iran would hit back against the US, has begun to be answered. Another is less certain. How much damage did America's attacks on Sunday inflict on Iran's nuclear program? Our science and technology editor Tom Clark examines what we know.
Donald Trump claims it was obliterated, but just how damaged is Iran's nuclear capability? Let's start with the prime target, Iran's most advanced facility at Fordo, suspected of being used to enrich uranium close to what's needed for a nuclear bomb. Using plans seized by Israeli spies in 2018, analysts suggest this could be the layout of the tunnels under the Fordo site. Here are the access roads leading to a 250-metre-long hall containing the uranium enrichment centrifuges. An assessment of this kind almost certainly influenced the targeting of at least 3 bunker-busting bombs to these 2 specific locations above the buried facility. Ventilation shafts may have been used to allow the bombs to penetrate as far as possible to get to the buried centrifuge hall beneath. But how much damage was actually done remains unknown, and it's more than likely any stockpile of enriched uranium there was removed before the strikes. Then there were the attacks on the facility at Natanz. Israeli raids, we've outlined here in orange, almost certainly targeted surface buildings, including stores of enriched uranium. However, post-strike radiation monitoring suggests there was little, if any, material there. At the weekend, the Americans dropped bunker buster bombs in this yellow area, targeting thousands of enrichment centrifuges operating in bunkers below. Then there's the Isfahan complex. Again, Israeli missiles destroyed a number of buildings outlined here in orange last week. And at the weekend, US cruise missiles targeted others, including the uranium conversion plant that turns uranium hexafluoride from centrifuges into uranium metal. If Iran wanted to build a bomb, that's a necessary step. And let's not forget, those are just some of the facilities targeted. There were strikes on at least 7 others, but that leaves 10 more with links to nuclear research, like Bonap up there.
Very well-developed, long-standing program with a lot of latent expertise in the country. So really, we're talking about degrees of degradation, not a full elimination of the program. So the question is, how far back are the Israelis or the Americans or whoever else happy to roll the program back? I don't think we're talking about a full elimination at this point, certainly not by military means.
So Iran's nuclear program hasn't been obliterated. Its stockpiles of highly enriched uranium likely remain, and much of the expertise it would need to make a weapon. But what's still uncertain is whether Iran was about to make that step, and more worryingly, whether it may be now, given recent attacks by Israel and America.
Tom Clark reporting there. Now, another dimension to this conflict is the potentially dire consequences for the global economy. Iran sits along one of the most important shipping channels in the world, the Strait of Hormuz. A fifth of the world's oil and gas flows through there. Closing or blockading the strait could prove another potent weapon in Iran's arsenal. Well, to discuss this further, joining me now is Dr. Ramanandan Krishnamurthy, Vice President of Energy and Innovation and Professor of Chemical Engineering at the University of Houston. Thank you so much, Professor, for joining us here on the program. I just want to first get your reaction to the developments this evening.
Well, it's been interesting, the attack on the Air Force and on the U.S. base, not necessarily at the economic sort of targets that Iran could have gone after. They chose very carefully to go after the military targets of the United States. And that, in some ways, should give the markets, the economic markets, the oil and gas markets, some comfort that this is not as dire as we would have projected otherwise.
Dr. Ramamurthy, just give us a sense of how the markets have been reacting over the course of the last 24 hours. And in terms of oil prices, how that's been dealing with what's been going on over the course of the last week and a half.
The primary volatility we've been seeing has been in the crude oil prices. As you mentioned, over a fifth to a quarter of all the oil consumed worldwide moves through the Straits of Hormuz. And that means that you start to cut off the potential to cut off a fraction of that oil to the world market can lead to a significant destabilization of the crude oil market. One of the interesting things about the global crude oil market is that it is a very tight balance between supply and demand, and a 1% reduction in supply would result in about a $25 increase in a price per barrel of oil worldwide. And that's what you would expect to see if you start to see substantial reductions of the flow of oil through the Straits of Hormuz.
Dr. Krishnamurthy, I guess the other question is that this idea that Iran could blockade the Strait of Hormuz, this is something that they could have up their sleeve if the situation continues to escalate between them and Israel. I guess if you could give us a picture of the impact that would have on the global economy.
So this is not the first time Iran has threatened to do significant damage to the oil supply around the world. When the war between Iran and Iraq happened in the Persian Gulf, they did mine significant portions of the Gulf in proximity to Iraq and Iran's oil exporting fields, and they are not shy to do it. It is a suicide mission in many ways for them because those mines will also impact a lot of the economic efforts that come out of Iran. But should they do it and they blockade a significant portion of the 21-mile Strait of Hormuz, that sort of the width of that strait is pretty narrow, and if they blockade a significant portion of it or make it unsafe for ships to traverse through it, it could have a chilling effect on the crude oil prices. Now, that said, it has to be persistent. One important thing to remember, Yalda, is there's about 60 days of crude oil supply that would get blocked off. Should the Strait of Hormuz get blocked off, there's about 60 days sort of buffer in the ships around the world that are carrying crude oil. So you won't see that spike immediately, but should this persist 30, 35, 40 days, that's when you would see the biggest impacts on the price of crude oil and then roll-on effects on refined products as well as liquefied natural gas.
Yeah, there's already reports that the Revolutionary Guard through radio are questioning some of these ships. And really, they do have free rein over the Strait of Hormuz, and they could do significant damage should they wish.
Yes, indeed, they could, and they have in the past, and they have carried out those tactics. My bigger fear would be more than even the Strait of Hormuz, right, at this point, would be for many of the significant production fields in Saudi Arabia. We've seen them hit Saudi Arabian fields in the past. That would be a place I would be wary of. And the other one would be in Qatar, where they produce a lot of natural gas. And they have the ability to attack those natural gas fields and processing areas that could simply cut off a significant supply for an extended period to Europe, China, and India in ways that will impact those countries directly. But both crude oil as well as natural gas are worldwide global commodities, and those prices will get reflected in the United States.
Dr. Krishnamurthy, we're really grateful for your time. Thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me, Yalda.
Now moving to another developing story tonight, and Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky has given Sky News an exclusive sit-down interview before he attends tomorrow's NATO summit in The Hague. Well, let's speak now to my colleague Mark Austin, who joins me now and conducted that interview. Mark, so many developments here on the ground, but of course, President Zelensky speaking to you today. Just give us a sense of what his mood was and what he had to say.
Well, good evening, Yalda. I mean, this war in Iran could not have come at a worse time in so many ways for Volodymyr Zelensky. He needs to command the attention of the world. He particularly needs to command the attention of Donald Trump, and that is not happening. But I sat down with him this evening for half an hour or so, and he was in a defiant mood. And there were two issues really bothering him. One was sanctions, and he made this point about dual-use components, countries allowing dual-use components to get into Russia to be used in the production of drones and missiles. And he made a specific point about how he says these components included components for the Oreshnik missile system. And he said this had to stop. Now, Sky News, as you know, has done a lot of work on dual-use equipment getting into Russia, particularly through neighboring countries like Azerbaijan. Ed Conway, our economics editor, has done a lot of work on this, and he said that also had to stop. The other point he wanted to make was about NATO and the meeting tomorrow, and this whole idea of NATO countries spending 5% of GDP on defense by 2035. And Volodymyr Zelensky said that was way too slow. Have a listen to what he had to say about that. There is talk of NATO countries having this target for spending of 5% GDP on defense by 2035. That's 10 years away. Is that too slow in your view?
Дуже повільно.
Very slowly. In my view, this is slow because we believe that starting from 2030, Putin can have significantly greater capabilities. Today, Ukraine is holding him up. He has no time to drill the army, and they are all getting annihilated and wiped out at the battlefield. In any case, he needs a pause. He needs sanctions to be lifted. He needs a drilled army, as he's got lots, more than 1 million people wounded or dead. Professional people who were professional warriors. And now he's got non-drilled ones. And 10 years is a very long time. He will have a new army ready by then.
Sorry, excuse me for interrupting, but do I understand you? Do you think that Putin could attack another NATO country within 5 years, test Article 5 within 5 years or fewer number of years?
Саме так.
Precisely so. I believe so.
A matter of months? Could he do it within months, do you think?
No. I believe he is not ready.
Mark, part of your conversation there with President Zelensky, and for a while we saw a lot of momentum building with Donald Trump pushing for not just ceasefire, but actual peace talks. Did he give you a sense of where things were at with that and his mindset?
Well, basically, he confirmed that there is no momentum now. He is insisting that he will only talk to the Russians seriously if there is a ceasefire. There's all those points that President Putin has come up with that need to be negotiated in the Russian mind. And Volodymyr Zelensky was absolutely categorical. He said he would not negotiate concessions or anything until there was a ceasefire. And of course, Vladimir Putin is not agreeing to a ceasefire. If anything, while the war in Iran is going on, the attacks on major cities in Ukraine have intensified. There have been a number of mass drone attacks on Kyiv, for instance. 10 more people died last night. So he was categoric that there would be no negotiations without a ceasefire. There is no sign of that ceasefire, as you know, Yalda. So things at the moment look pretty bleak for Ukraine.
Mark, thank you so much. And just a reminder, you'll be able to watch Mark's full UK exclusive interview with the Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky tomorrow from 6 a.m. here on Sky News. Now, we've been following all the developments from here in Jerusalem, and I just want to leave you this evening with these images that came in from Qatar a little earlier when we first started to see those missiles raining over the skies of the Qatari capital, Doha, aimed at the Al Udeid US airbase there. Of course, we now know that this operation was staged. Donald Trump has thanked the Emir of Qatar for his assistance. We are following all the developments here from the region, a region on edge. But for now, stay with us. The news at 10 is coming up next.